Got a couple more cars just pulling in, but we're going to go get started. It's straight up 9 o'clock. It's good to see everyone out this morning. Encourage you to take hold of your Bibles and turn to 2 Timothy. We're going to pick up where we left off last Sunday morning. Well, 2 Sundays morning. We just finished up our gospel meeting. Well, pleasant surprise. Seeing the Stocktons walk through. Blast from the past. In just a few moments, we're going to ask Craig, who's visiting with us from the congregation down in Alabama. Craig's been here a time or two visiting us in the past. I'm going to ask him to lead us in an opening word of prayer in just a few moments. Of course, you know Samantha had baby Willow Friday, and mother and baby are doing just fine, so let's continue to remember them in our prayers. Bernice texted me this morning. She was up all night in pain. So she says she's going to try to make it for the afternoon service and, of course, bring her dad then. So we need to remember her. The Middlebrooks are still out of town, and I'm not sure when they're due back. I think it's early this week, and so let's remember them. So we got a few out of town, but we've got a number of visitors, and we're glad you've come our way. And so before we get into our Bible study this morning, Craig, will you go ahead and lead us in an opening word of prayer?
Let's pray. Our God and our Father in heaven, we are so very thankful. We're very humbled, Lord, that you have allowed us to come before your throne as we bow before you in prayer. Lord, we are thankful for this assembly, for this church, as you allow us to gather together as brothers and sisters in Christ. We ask, Lord, that you would bless this number of those that are traveling and those that are suffering in pain, and also allow us to be thankful with those that celebrate new life. Father, we pray as we open your good word that we would study from it and glean from it positive things as your truth is revealed to us, that you would help us to have open hearts and open minds, and that you would be with Chuck as he has studied, that he would remember the things he has prepared, and that we would take this word and we would learn and study it as accurately as possible, and that we would do so in spirit and in truth. We, Lord, pray that you would forgive us if we have failed against these. We forgive those who sin against us. And we do all of these things in your Son, Jesus' holy name. Amen.
Amen. Okay. Dan just reminded me this is my first Bible study I'm teaching as an American, so I don't know if it'll come across any different than last time I taught. Anyways, it's so good to be with you guys, and I'm going to read the first 5 verses. We read them last week, and we only got through the first 2 verses, obviously, because of the wealth of material that was in there, that is in here. And I'm looking for a lot of participation this morning as we get into some questions as we relate to what's going on and what's going to transpire. Look at verse 1 again. I'll remind you of what we did discuss last week. Paul said, I charge you therefore before God and the Lord Jesus Christ, who will judge the living and the dead at his appearing and his kingdom. He says to Timothy to preach the word, be ready in season and out of season, convince, rebuke, exhort with all long-suffering and teaching. Now here's the stuff we didn't talk about last week. For the time will come when they will not endure sound doctrine, but according to their own desires, because they have itching ears, they will heap up for themselves teachers, and they will turn their ears away from the truth and be turned aside to fables. But you be watchful in all things, endure afflictions, do the work of an evangelist, fulfill your ministry. Now, what we're going to spend our first few minutes talking about this morning, I want you to pick your brain. He's talking about people here that are not going to endure sound doctrine. I'm not going to go back to verse 2. We discussed that last time. The time will come when they will not endure sound doctrine. So they're going to turn their ears away from the truth and heap for themselves teachers. Now, my question for you is, when it says they will not endure, does that first of all imply that they had been enduring? Yes, so we have people who have been enduring sound doctrine. They were converted to it. In other words, they received it and they were following it. My question for you guys is, what would cause people to stop enduring sound teaching? What are some of the reasons, and there are many, because we need to guard. If we're going to learn from this, we need to say to ourselves, well, Chuck, I'm enduring sound doctrine. I want sound doctrine. That's why I come here, and I don't ever want to lose my taste for it. Well, good. Then let's keep alert to things that might cause us to no longer desire it. So what is the answer? What causes people to no longer desire to endure sound doctrine? One,
family and friends.
Okay. More specific? What are we meaning by that, family and friends? I don't want to endure sound doctrine anymore. What? Because of family and friends. What do we mean by that?
They're listening to something else.
Okay.
They're believing something else.
Right. And when you abide in sound doctrine and continuing in it, you might have family that don't like that, and it creates friction within the family. And when it creates friction, usually what people want to do is they want to compromise. Tim?
Well, maybe there's some change in your family structure or situation. Now I've got a different issue in my family that I have to deal with, and because of that, I'm going to not endure anymore.
Isn't that the truth? I'm going to tell you guys, I don't know how many times I've talked to preachers over the years who have taught sound doctrine on certain biblical issues, but they changed their position. And when do you think they changed their position? When it was in their family. When the issue came up, well, I'm not going to preach that anymore because it's in my own family. Mark?
Well, I was going to say, I think at the core of the problem is people start losing respect for God's authority.
Okay.
When that happens, then it's easy to start deviating from the biblical plan.
That's it. And I like that one. That's powerful. When you start having less respect for the Word, obviously, I mean, you guys are right now saying, look, we just had a meeting. What did we invite the person to come and do? Preach the gospel. That's right. I mean, we wanted to preach the gospel. And when you have a love for the truth and a person presents the truth, everything is fine. But what happens is when you start losing that love for the Word and feeding on the Word, and when that happens, when people start emphasizing it more, you're not liking it. So you're not going to endure and you're going to turn away from it. So that's powerful. And that can happen to us today, which shows us how important it is for us to hold on to that. Mark?
Well, I was going to add also, if you remember, Paul, when he left the church at Ephesus, the Ephesians, they were all, it was an emotional event because they hated to see Paul leave. But he cautioned, warned them that people from among them would rise up teaching the first things.
That's it.
And that's scary for this reason, because if you have an apostle who is receiving direct revelation from God, telling you what you should be doing, and you still abandon it, to me, that's scary.
I'm going to tell you, Mark, I'm going to tie that in, making this a separate point, because in Acts chapter 20, when he called for those elders, you're right, and they were weeping because he said they're going to rise from among you, these false teachers. And so what would cause you to no longer endure sound doctrine is when you allow somebody to come in and preach to you and influence you and dull your senses and allow you to be led astray. And you're like, I like this kind of preaching. And somebody who likes sound doctrine says, yeah, but it's weak, it's watered down, there's nothing. Yeah, but I find it very entertaining. And so what happens is he has conditioned you, and so you've got to be aware of that. And you're right, Mark, you have to stay alert, because the idea of they were enduring sound doctrine, but they no longer are, did that happen overnight? No, it's the gradual process that we have to be alert about, because it can happen to us. Mallory, give me one.
I was going to say, like, the political or social climate can change, making it harder to endure.
That's exactly right. I'm going to endure it because of, I want to be even more general than that, because there's a lot of things that pertain to that. The political aspect, what were you going to say, Craig?
Well, it ties in with the social aspect of it, but if I had to characterize it, I'd say maybe novelty, because we have to keep in mind, Mark had mentioned false teachers, and they had endured sound doctrine. It's possible that it was a combination of false teachers coming in, and this is likely the first generation of new Christians. If this truly is around 65 AD and the church is only 30 years old.
It's young.
It's just young. This is the first group of brand new Christians that are coming up, and their children are having to continue their faith. So it's probably a combination of maybe young ones being brought up and having itching ears because they've heard the gospel and they're craving something different that is socially polymorphic and different and pagan. And so it's probably a combination of false teachers and family, because the family didn't prepare the next generation as well as they should, and the false teachers worked their way in.
Do you guys know what's popular in the world today? How do you know what's popular in the world today? How do you know what's popular, what people are liking? Turn on the TV, okay? You're exposed to it. Go to school. Just go to work. I mean, because people are talking, right? People are expressing how they feel. You know, they turn on the radio. You know, they're reading books. Look on social media. If you want to know what's popular out there, it will not take you long to find out what is socially acceptable and what isn't. And that ties into verse 2 last week. You preached the word instant in season and out of season, when it's popular and when it's not, when they like it, when they don't like it. And this is what we're noticing. Timothy, you have to do this, and for those people who want to endure, but the fact of the matter is that there's going to be people there that will not endure sound doctrine for a variety of reasons. And he mentioned one in this passage, which we could probably tie it into a few of these other things. It's probably point number 2 that it ties into, is that there's no longer, when you don't love the truth, when you just, isn't that sad? I mean, you know society in general doesn't have a love for the truth, because what do they crave? Think of magazines by the checkout stand, you know. People crave gossip. Don't they? They just crave it. And they're not so much interested in the truth per se. You know, I've told you guys in the past where I was talking with somebody years ago where there was a trial going on, and there was only one person in the room, and they had a person accusing each other of something that happened, and the person told me, says, well, I know he's guilty. How do you know that? You know, people like to jump to conclusions without the evidence that is there. And I'm going to tell you something. When you lose a love for the truth, you're not enduring sound doctrine. There's just no way. It can't happen. Now,
I think another reason people may stop enduring is that they let their curiosity get the best of them.
oh, absolutely. Oh, way to go, Mel. You know, if you're going to say that, you're going to have to spell it for me. Curiosity. And if I spelled it wrong, just take one of these letters from the alphabet and plug it in there. Let's face it. How did Satan get Eve to take the fruit?
You won't die. Yeah, lied to her.
Yeah, and
Well, he appealed to the fruit itself, how nice it was.
yeah, I mean, she's looking. I mean, the more you look and see, you know, I'm not the smartest guy around, you know, but you know, a lot of things that kids get themselves involved in today, and you know, adults too. It starts out with that curiosity. You know, I wonder what it's going to be like. I wonder what it'd be like to swallow a Tide thing. I'm not going there. But anyways, yeah, but people will do that. I wonder what it's going to be like. And curiosity is what gets us in trouble. And when you start drifting away from this, and somebody says, you know what, here's something I want you to read. Well, you know, did a Christian write that? Well, no. You know, but he's got a lot of ideas. Well, is it based on what the Bible, does he support it with what the Bible says? Well, no, but I want you to read it. Red flag, red flag, red flag, danger, danger, danger. Because, you know, the philosophies, and that's what it is. You know, people want to get very philosophical. Great theologians, great thinkers, right? I just let's keep it simple. The gospel of Jesus Christ is not that complicated, guys. Sound doctrine isn't that hard. Well, it's hard, but it's not that hard to understand. Mark.
I was going to say, just as a side note to what you're saying, the very thing that happened to the Jews has happened a lot in religion. We've got to be careful ourselves, because it isn't long before the commentary ends up taking equal weight with the actual.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. I don't want somebody saying, you know, Chuck said this. Chuck, don't go quoting me. You know, you want to be quoting this. This is the sound doctrine. Jane?
One of the main reasons, I think of myself and whatnot, is that Romans 10:17, we quote that a lot.
Yeah.
Faith comes by hearing, and hearing by the word of God, which means that from day to day, if we're not studying, then we have a good possibility of falling away.
Yeah, just lack of faith. And I might touch on something you guys talked about earlier, because I'm really hard on preachers. I really am. I'm really hard on preachers. Because you talk about conditioning people. You know, we talk about false teachers. And it's easy for you to not endure sound doctrine, because when it says here, you guys tell me what's going to happen. Tell me what's going to happen here. When it says, because they have itching ears, they will heap up for themselves teachers. So what's going to happen now? Now tell me what happens then. What happens then when you get those teachers? They're going to get teachers that are not teaching sound doctrine. So what are you going to get, Dave?
Well, they rely on someone else instead of God's Word.
That's true. I just want you to see is that you're going to get deep teachers who are not going to provide that for you, and you're going to like it. So you have to think that through. What is it that they're not giving you?
Well, they're not giving you all the truth, right? They're giving you parts of it or the parts that you want to hear, but the controversial subjects they'll avoid because nobody wants to hear those. They'll hear the things that just want to unite, with what's popular. This is what's popular, this is what people want to hear, that's what I'll preach.
That's right. And you have to think about it, guys. Please give it some thought. When it says they will heap up for themselves teachers because they have itching ears, remember, what kind of teacher is that? You have to visualize that. What kind of preacher that preaches for the Church of Christ? What kind of preacher that a group of people that don't want sound doctrine, but they still want a preacher? They still want a preacher. You have to visualize what kind of person is that in the pulpit? An entertainer, right?
Well, Warren, it's someone who wants to compromise the truth.
That's right.
In order to accommodate the affections of those who are willing to listen to that and support him.
That's it. Just make you feel good all the time. Go ahead, Tim.
I can break it right down to facts. I was in a business meeting, and we were looking for a preacher. One of the requirements of what one of the men wanted was a preacher that would take his kids fishing. Now this is a fact. Take them fishing.
This wasn't the business meeting when I was out of town. No. Okay, go ahead.
Here, but somebody to take the kids fishing, which means socialize or whatnot.
Right.
I mean, no thought of the truth.
Right. Well, I've heard that in a lot of places, Gene. The idea of a youth minister comes to mind right off when you talk. We need a youth minister. We need somebody who can appeal to the children. And I'm thinking, no, this is what we want them to teach. My kids, they didn't have other kids, and these small works that we were part of, it's like, well, these camps, that's kind of cool and stuff. But what's going to keep my kids on the straight and narrow is the gospel of Jesus Christ. That's what they needed. And that's what's going to help them. Mallory?
Well, sorry. Another thing I think of, like, for enduring, I don't like running, but I will run further if I'm running with someone else. So if you feel like you're doing this by yourself, like outside of assembly, you feel like you're alone, you're not going to endure nearly as long as if you have other people who are also, training and doing it with you.
So in line with this, would we make a statement that I'm not going to endure because I'm blaming on others?
Well, I would just say if you feel like isolated, you're alone and you're tired of being alone and you just want to be with, other people. Like you come to assembly and you're like with everybody, but outside of that, you're like, I'm doing this by myself.
I agree. You're onto a bunch of things here, and I'm just trying to tie it into something that.
I think you can what she's saying, like you can isolate yourself. Like if you aren't engaged and active in the work, yeah, you're
right.
Either
kind of
lack of
isolated.
encouragement or you isolate yourself. I mean, there's both sides of it.
Right. Give me a word.
Isolation.
And that's a danger, right? I mean, let's face it. If I'm the last one to come here and the first one to leave every week, am I getting stronger? Am I feeling closer to my brethren? Am I encouraging them? Are they encouraging me? We don't get a chance to. And so what will happen is there isn't so much emphasis on the truth that's being taught. The emphasis is more on, is this thing still on? Chuck. Jane?
Let's don't forget forget, our responsibility, whether we're going to go to heaven or not, is my responsibility of going to heaven or not doesn't depend upon you
Right.
or anybody else.
No, these are excuses that we're talking about. These are not reasons. You're right, Jane.
That's an excuse.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. These are not, what we're talking about, this list here, are things that we have to avoid. You're right. We have to avoid. You're making that as an excuse. There's no excuse for any of it. There's no excuse for not enduring sound doctrine. I don't care if you have, well, I do care if you have a false teacher, but yank them out of it.
But, you know, what Matt does, whatever good or poor, what Matt's doing doesn't have anything to do with me going to heaven, because I have to keep in my mind
Yes.
that I have to work myself.
That's right. That's right. That's right. But I'm telling you that there are people who put themselves in that situation where they eventually lose their love for the truth. They're being conditioned by society. There's no excuse for that. I mean, let's just understand that. What we're talking about is things here that we need to make sure that we avoid in our lives, because it's going on. I mean, was this a first century problem? Is this just a first century problem? I mean, come on. I mean, let's face it. People fall away all the time. And it's that gradual process, and what it is when somebody falls away and you go and talk to them, you're going to them with sound doctrine, and they don't want to listen to it because they have fallen away. So what we're doing in our study today is learning that, yes, this is going to happen. Here's some of the reasons why it happens, and let's make sure it doesn't happen. So having said that, when you look at Timothy here, it says they will turn their ears away from the truth and be turned aside to fables. Okay, Timothy. This is what's going to happen, and here's maybe some of the whys it's going to happen. So what's Timothy going to do to try to prevent that from happening? What's he going to do? Yeah.
Well, one, he's going to continue preaching the word.
That's
He's
it.
not going to deviate. He's going to continue the straight and narrow and preaching, doing the work with him. It says for him to endure.
Yeah.
You endure, right?
You endure.
They won't endure, but you do endure.
Yeah. And so, what should Timothy not focus on? So he stays focused. What should he not focus on? Numbers. Okay.
Praise the man.
Praise of man. Popularity. You know, everybody loves me. Everybody loves me. What's another thing you don't want to focus on?
Persecution.
Yeah, you're persecuted, so I quit. No, you have to endure. I mean, the whole fact is that if you don't have any hardships, didn't Jesus say, beware when all men speak well of you? What's he mean by that? Yeah, I mean, exactly right. They had the 18 years. I saw him more.
Well, you said what I was thinking about, that those things that, Jesus, that there was some walked away from Jesus in his teaching, and he asked his disciples, will you leave also? So it's not a new thing.
Right.
It's not a new
Right.
thing. If everybody likes you, you're not telling the truth to somebody along the way, because they're not all going to be of the same mind.
Exactly. Exactly. Now, is this negative? Is this negative teaching this morning? It is to who? Yeah. Those that are not enduring, let's move on, please. Let's get off of this. Because, but we're talking about preventative measures here. I don't want to be a person that has itching ears. I will heap up for themselves a teacher that's going to please me, tickle my ear, make me feel good all the time. Be honest, guys. Do you want to feel uncomfortable from a sermon?
No.
Really? I'm being serious.
Well, I mean,
Don't you want to feel uncomfortable sometimes?
well, if I'm doing wrong, yeah.
Like to be challenged. You might not necessarily be wrong even in your life, but if somebody's putting some challenges before you, some goals, a person that doesn't set goals, what do they accomplish?
Nothing.
Nothing. You have goals in life, right? And so in preaching the Word of God, it's not necessarily criticizing your present state, but saying, you know what? Here's some things that we can be doing. And there's something wrong if we don't want to be challenged, or, hey, if I'm doing something wrong, man, I hope it's preached on today. Really? Do we think that way, Mark?
Well, in my opinion, that, we use that analogy of the purification of the soul, like the metal worker putting metal in the fire, pass back and forth.
Yeah.
And if we're not experiencing that to some degree, then we need to do some evaluation. Either we have somebody who is, like you said, a man pleaser, or we're not listening.
Raise your hand if you got nothing to improve on in your life. Come on, so I mean, if you're not raising your hand because you don't think you're perfect, and you hear a sermon that is challenging that or trying to get you out of your comfort zone, you're either going to like it or you're not going to like it. James?
If we feel that we're perfect, then we're not going to grow.
No, not at all.
In other words, I can remember the time I was on the road in a hotel, and one of our women, at that time, we didn't have women to sell it. But I was in this hotel in Terre Haute, and she called and said, "You want to have lunch?" So a red signal, a red frame went up. And I said, sure. But that in itself, man away from home, a week, and all this and that.
Right.
So you have to be careful of yourself.
Well, I think the biggest problem is, and I think Paul put it best, and you guys remember 1 Timothy chapter 10, verse 12? We read verse 13 a lot, that God's not going to allow us to be tempted beyond that we are able. Do you remember verse 12? It's short. You'll finish it. I'll just give you 2 words. Take heed, lest you fall. Now, is he telling us we're going to fall? No, but I'll tell you what. If you don't think you're going to ever fall, if you don't think that could even happen, you're not putting any precautions in place. A person that thinks they're never going to die is not going to take out what? A life insurance policy, because I'm never going to die. A person thinks they'll never get into a car accident? Well, you should. But the point is, you should have, not should have a car accident, but you should have car insurance. Yeah, so we accept the fact that we can fall. If there's anything we've learned in our Bible study today, you walk out of here and say, I don't know what we all talked about today. We talked about so many different things. I hope you remember that and I'll talk about me, I could develop an itching ear. I want to be tickled. I'm getting up on Sunday morning and I just want to be stroked, patted on the back all the time. Now that doesn't mean you beat somebody. Every sermon is boom, 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 like nobody's going to make it to heaven. You need the balance in the teaching, and that's what he talked about here. Remember, we talked about that last week when he says convince, rebuke, and exhort. He didn't say, Timothy, I want you to go rebuke, rebuke, and rebuke, and rebuke, and rebuke. He didn't tell him to do that. And we need to be mindful of that. Jane?
This is the reason that the plans to have elders in the congregation.
Yeah.
Somebody has to be able to say, no, we can't do that.
Right. Or even have the balance. I've known elders that have gone up to a preacher and said, listen, can we have a little bit more of the other balance of building up a little bit because we feel like we've been beaten down a little bit. Okay, don't take offense to that. Guy did get offended by it, but you just need balance. You need to be mindful of that. Remember, and you guys were talking about this. Verse 4, they will turn their ears away from the truth and be turned aside to fables. And that's the sad part. It's not just, you would think if somebody doesn't want to hear the truth anymore, I'm out of here. Right? You just think, okay, I don't want to hear it anymore. No, that's sad. It's not like it's like leaving here and going to some denomination. I know we get shocked at that sometimes. Oh, I guess, and when I've heard things like that, you'll hear people murmur and say, well, I wonder what was taught from the pulpit. I mean, how does a guy leave and go into denominationalism? Well, the reason he left was because he didn't want to hear sound doctrine. So, if anything, you might say, he's been getting it, but he didn't want it anymore. Or she didn't want it anymore. Dave?
3 reasons that would hold somebody back from wanting the love of the truth. And that is lust of the eye, lust of the flesh, and regular life.
Well, that's definitely what tempts them, okay? That tempts them to fall and give in to that and then drift away. There's no question. Look what he says, and again, turning aside to fables. What's a fable?
It's a story.
It's a story.
What's that, Mark?
Well, the context of this verse would be a story.
Yeah, that's right. Tim?
Yeah, it's just a non-truth. It's not the standard. Anything other than the standard, whether it's 1% false or 100% false.
Don't you love a good story? You love a good story? Stories can be very entertaining, can't they? And people become good storytellers. And that's why, they're turned to, somebody mentioned earlier about being entertained. And people, because we live in a society where people want to be entertained all the time. People are walking down the street, they're watching a movie on their iPhone. It's 24/7 entertainment. They have 2 minutes of downtime and they're playing, I don't even know the names of the games on the phone, but something to do with, never mind, I don't even know what it is. Now look at verse 5. So he says to Timothy, but you be watchful in all things, endure afflictions, and we talked about that briefly. Endure afflictions. I'm going to tell you, do you guys ever suffer persecution where you felt like throwing in the towel? Be honest. You ever suffer where you felt like throwing in the towel? Have a brother or sister turn on you, stab you in the back, say things about you that just weren't true? I don't know anybody that hasn't been there. If you haven't been there, it's not fun. It is just not fun. I don't know how many times over the years I said, that's it. Well, not within the last 10 years, but over the years, that's it, I quit. I quit because if you can't, being persecuted, if you can't handle that, I said, well, I would do fine if I just wasn't persecuted. Well, Jesus would have been fine too if he hadn't been persecuted. But the point is, he was persecuted for standing up for what was right. That's what got him on the cross. Mark?
Well, I know what you're asking, and I know in times of my life, my own personal circumstances, I've had to give up people I loved. But I was always, in the back of my mind, I always had this question, the same question that Peter asked. To whom shall we go?
Yeah, like what are my options, right? Like, I'm going to quit being a Christian. Brother so-and-so was bad to me at services, I'm quitting. And I just don't get that. There's a bunch of hypocrites over there. I'm not going there anymore. And I'm thinking, something's just not right about that. And you know that illustration I've used because it's like any of you, your wife comes home and says, or your husband comes home and says, the marriage is over. And she starts crying. And he says, well, why is the marriage over? Well, I just found out Bill down the street doesn't love you as much as I do. Okay. So that's basically somebody here saying, they don't love the Lord as much as I love the Lord, so I'm not worshiping the Lord anymore. Oh, that makes a lot of sense. Why are you taking it out on God? But people in their mind, they reason through that and it justifies it. Now, if the whole congregation, if they're not enduring, what's coming across from the pulpit, you're at a place where they're not standing for what is right and you've tried to teach them. I get that. But you don't quit the Lord. You can go somewhere where they are standing for what is right. I get that. But the whole idea of I'm just giving up and quitting, I want to blame somebody else, it's just not going to cut it. So we have to endure afflictions. And they're going to come. Dan.
A lot of times in that example you just gave, people who quit, part of what they'll justify is that, you'll say this group is no good, I'm going to continue my individual service to God. We go back and we look at what Timothy is being instructed to do here. This is all public stuff.
Yes.
So he's saying even when it gets hard, don't quit the public things.
Yeah.
That's the distinction that a lot of people miss.
Yeah. Because they're the ones, those are the ones that, like we've said before, the two things that could possibly happen, I asked you last week, to a preacher that's preaching sound doctrine that people don't like it, one of two things are going to happen. They're going to yank you out of the pulpit, or they're going to leave. It's just one of two. And so if they leave because of sound doctrine, that's like an affliction, isn't it? There are people do we like it when people leave? I don't like it. I remember being at the school. I'll never forget being at the school when we were worshiping there. When the building burned down, I can remember somebody coming in there and sitting down, came in a little late, a visitor, and the more I preached, the more upset she was getting, and just stomped out of there. You know, it happens. It's not what they were wanting to hear, and realize they're probably in the wrong place. So he went on to say, do the work of an evangelist. Well, isn't the work of an evangelist, Gene, to go fishing? To take the young people fishing? Isn't that the work of an evangelist? Shouldn't he be organizing camping trips for the young people? Isn't that the work of an evangelist? Organizing potlucks? That's what the evangelist is supposed to do. What's the work of an evangelist? What's the work?
Preach and teach.
Preach and teach. Now, part of that then, to preach and teach, how are you going to do that? What do you got to do? So, well, but to preach and teach, you got to know the word. So what are you going to have to do now? You better be studying. You have to study it and preach it and teach it publicly, privately. Practice what you preach. Do the work. It's a work, is it not? It's a work. Do the work of an evangelist is the point. But people want to turn the work of an evangelist, they want to define his work. Now, I gave you a sarcastic few examples, but what do other people think the work of an evangelist is? But it's not. Entertain? Mal?
Well, I think it is, but it's not exclusive to the evangelist. You know, it's like visiting the sick or praying over people. You know, a lot of times people try to pile on their personal responsibilities onto what they, you know, we're all commanded to go visit the sick or the elderly.
Is that the work of an evangelist?
Yeah, it's not exclusive.
It's not. It's not the work of an evangelist.
Yeah.
It's the work of a
That's what
Christian.
it's-
I will do that. I mean, the sad part is when I heard of a young man who was going to go try out a place, he said, I don't go to hospital. And I'm thinking, what's the matter with you, buddy? You know, you should be one of the first ones by example to go. See, don't misunderstand what I told Mallory. No, I'm saying there are things that we do as Christians, you know. Is it the work of an evangelist to be hospitable? Is it the work of the evangelist to be hospitable? Do people think that's a work of the evangelist? Absolutely. They think that's the work of an evangelist. It's not the work of an evangelist. Now, should an evangelist be hospitable? Absolutely. Because is this evangelist a Christian? Yes. Yeah, you better be. Better be. We're talking, Jamie.
A lot of congregations have had problems because, I'm not picking on preachers,
Go.
but the preacher, if you don't have elders, is supposedly
It can happen.
the leader.
Okay.
What
So
happens if this person wants to be comfortable and secure in his job, and the first thing he will do, he will start getting members and building coalition that to where you couldn't get rid of him because he's got there's more for him than they're against him.
yeah. So you're dealing more with what that preacher. But I want to tie what you were talking about there into another point, Gene. Because this idea, what the work of an evangelist is not, the work of the evangelist is not to head the church. But how many people think the work of an evangelist is to head the church? Is the work of an evangelist to run all the business meetings? Do people think he should run all the business meetings? Yes. Is the work of an evangelist to do all the evangelizing? But do they think that's what he's paid to do? And we're not going to do that, Tim.
As we mentioned before, that's the pastoral system that the denominational world has.
That's what I'm trying to bring out from this, guys. I'm trying, you know, our viewers that stream this, we have a lot of people that watch this. I want them to hear and understand that there can be this pastor, quote, pastor system that has been brought into the Lord's body because they think the work of an evangelist is this, and it's none of those things. And a lot of those duties are just duties we do as Christians, and we should be doing it. And there's no way I'm going to sit back and say that, well, I'm not visiting so-and-so. That's not my job. You don't care about them? Well, then get over there and visit them. You know, and encourage them and help them. And usually preachers are blessed with some time during the day where others are at their office, wherever they're at. My office happens to be in my home, and I've had that flexibility to do some certain things, and that's good. But I think this is good for us because we're learning what's going to help us endure sound doctrine. Because if I'm being fooled as a Christian of thinking, well, that's the preacher's job, when I realize, wait a minute, that's my job. That'll help me stay faithful. All right, so good stuff there. And then he says, do the work of the evangelist, fulfill your ministry. So, in other words, Timothy, you've got a work to do. Just focus on that. That's the key. Okay, we finished verses 1 through 5, and we still have 5 minutes left. Any other comments on what we've been discussing there about enduring? Maybe you have a comment about things that need to be in place to help us stay on the straight and narrow. Mal.
I think at the beginning of verse 5, mine says always be sober-minded.
Mm-hmm.
I think, sometimes preachers don't even realize they're being influenced from the world as well. They could read something and then they could read the Bible and then read something else and they think that they relate, and so they're being influenced by outside sources without even noticing, which is why I think, Paul's telling me, you need to be sober-minded all the time too. You need to always be aware of what you're studying, make sure you're studying the full truth and not, being influenced by the past or, what's going on to make you read the gospel in a different light.
Well, we really do, and I want to expand on that a little bit because I've even taught this in talking with preachers privately, even this past week, and when Wayne was in this week. I think we have a tremendous responsibility is that we preach things that are relevant to what's going on, what we might be facing, some of the hardships, some of the difficulties, some of the issues that might arise, and be in tune to what's going on. We to be aware of what needs to be preached on. There's just no way I'm going to put in the bulletin what I'm going to preach for the next month. I'm not going to do it. I have no idea what I'm preaching next Sunday. Where some preachers have it lined out. A month ahead of time, they know what their subjects are, and they let people know about that. I'm not going to do that because there are things that are come up. And I'm not necessarily saying what they're doing is wrong, because they can be in tune, but they're just ahead of me. But the point is, we have to be watchful and see the needs. There are needs that need to be met here, and that's why I want you guys, I want your needs to be met. And I've had brethren come up here, brethren have come up to me and say, Chuck, I haven't heard a lesson on this. I think this would be really helpful to me. And I'm sure to others. And I'm sure they're right. And I've gone ahead and done that. And that's good, because I'm not a mind reader, but I am trying to provide you guys with the spiritual nutrition that's going to help you, as a husband, as a wife, as a parent, as a citizen, as a member of the congregation here. And just all the different things that need to be touched on. And it's a challenge, making sure that those things are being met, that balance that needs to be in your life. Jane?
That's the reason that a Bible study of this kind, where people can ask questions, discuss.
Yeah.
I mean, the experience, I know of a family that had to leave a congregation here in Evansville because he would ask a question, and finally they were told, maybe you would be happier some other place. Preacher.
Well, Gene, I will tell you this. The cool thing about Bible classes and people talking, and then if you get some people like lacking clarification in something, well, do a sermon on it. To help everybody a little bit more, and so we can have a little more to digest, and you can hear about that in the comments, and something might be a little off, but I think they're okay. I'm not going to rebuke them in the class, but for clarification, let me just go ahead and preach a sermon on that, and that can be helpful. We're going to get into this next section, guys. We're going to be talking about Paul in verses 6 through 9. His departure is at hand. Really positive as far as the kind of attitude we need to have. Death might be approaching us. God forbid that we're ever told that we have a terminal illness. I've been talking with some folks recently about this. Some dear friends of ours that are going through this. But what a comfort is of knowing what Paul's talking about, that and we can have it too. If death is knocking at the door, I'm ready for it. I hope we can say that. I'm ready for it. Now, I feel bad that I'm going to say goodbye to my family and friends, but you know what? There's something way, way better waiting for me. Really? Yes, way better. And that's what we're going to talk about, Lord willing, next week when we deal with what Paul's departure. Thanks, guys. I appreciate your comments this morning. Now we'll get ready for worship.
Shouldn't be a green light when not red light. You know, green light means go, red means.
Did I?
I see a red light. Isn't it supposed to be green?
Now it's green.
That's right.
I'm good to go.
Good to go.
Saw your daughter working at Fresh Time.
Yeah.
Yeah, she spotted us. You know, we were in a different checkout and she saw us. Yeah, that's good. Yeah, it seems like a good company. I don't know, I hope so.
She said they work a lot, I think. That's a lot of hours. She was always busy. She said, I haven't been there yet. I've not been there.
That's good. It's a good store. I like it.
So what is it, a lot of fresh? Fresh time, a lot of fresh food?
Yeah, it's a regular grocery store. But they have a lot of organic stuff. I thought their yeah, the regular.
Okay. That's not no thing.